Here we are again, folks. Brother Peter, tidbits from the Word. I've got to try to back up and cut these things off in 30 minutes. So this is going to be, Lord willing, a 30-minute setting. Now we are in the book of 1 Peter, and we're going to read verses 6 and 7 in 1 Peter. We have come from where Peter was called, and he was called an ignorant fisherman, but he was called also to be an apostle of Jesus Christ. The world called him one thing, and Jesus called him another. And he was changed from being a follower of the world and a follower of what he was into following a fisher of men. He quit fishing for fish and fished for men. And that's a place where many of us sometimes need to get. My actual preacher, the preacher I have right now, was a champion fisherman at one time with many perks. His life, as far as quality of living goes, was excellent for people pouring stuff on him. The only problem was he had to be on the water 7 days a week, nearly, all the time to keep up his image. And so he had to do that. He was owned by companies that said, I'm going to name a boat after you. I'm going to name a fishing rod after you. I'm going to put some fishing line out here. I'm going to make some lures and put your name on them. And that's where he was. But when God got a hold of him and said, hey, I want you to be a preacher. He said, I have to quit fishing? You do in the sense of the way you fished. Now, if you want to fish, you can go out for a day or two, or a minute or two, or for some little bit of pleasure. But I want all of your attention. I want you fishing for men, not for fish, for men. And so he now is a fisher of men. This is what Peter was. Peter was a fisherman, and now he's a fisher of men. And he brought this great, powerful change in his life. God had to do it. Peter was a very strong-willed man. Peter, by the way, was one of the most intelligent men that ever walked on this earth. You take a man that's got enough intelligence to learn a trade, learn how to do the trade at its maximum, and learn how to take care of that, and be a stewardess as a fisherman was, then you are a smart man. By the way, being a fisherman during the time of year the fish were running, like Peter was, it left no downtime. I worked on a dock when I was a very young man. I had a fishing dock. And the fish ran. We fished up north. We fished for whiting. And those whiting ran a certain time of the year. For a certain month, they were coming through our water there. And as they came through our water, we had to... excuse the phone. As they came through our water, we had to fish them 24 hours a day. The boats would come in. They would come in. Some of them would have 13,000 pounds, some 16, some 20,000 pounds. We would unload those pounds off that boat. And after we got them unloaded, the boat would leave there. The boat would go over and fuel up and get ready to go back out. They would get everything that they needed on that boat. And they would haul their nets up. And they would check their nets. And they would mend their nets. And here it is already the second day. It's daylight now. They were unloading their boat. They came in right at dark, or a little after dark, and we unloaded their boats. Now it's daylight. They're checking their nets. And they're headed back out. They got a 6-hour run in the water to get out where the fish are. So they're running 5 to 6 hours out, and they haven't had but a cat nap. Now, the guy that's the captain of the boat can say to the net mender, look, I've got to take a nap. I'm going to take a nap. You keep that compass right there, right here. South, southwest, right on the money. You keep it on there and keep plowing for the next 3 hours. And I'm going to take a nap. And he gets him a nap. But that's the only rest he gets. He doesn't get to go home and see his wife. He doesn't get to go home and see his kids. He doesn't get to go home. No. He's got 1 month of fishing. And that month of fishing, he's tied into that boat. He's tied into that life. He's tied into it unrelenting. The man he hires to be his second hand has got to be the same way. If he's got three on there, all three have to agree. They've got one thing in mind, and this thing they've got in mind is to run that boat. Is to run that boat and to do what that boat says to do. And that's it. Nothing else. And to run that. So here they are. Here's Peter, a fisherman. He knows how to do it. He knows. You remember when Jesus was on the shore and those disciples come in the boat and they're coming in to moor off for the day. And they have fished and toiled. Peter said he used the word toil. That means they worked. They put the net out. And they dragged the net in. And the net was empty. It was just as much work to drag an empty net in as a full one. And they toiled all night. And they hadn't taken anything. And Jesus said to them, "Hey boys, cast your net on the other side of the ship." Peter said, "Lord, I'm a champion fisherman. I know where the fish are. And there's no fish over there, especially right now. We've been here. We came in. We know where the fish are." But Jesus, under his breath, said, "Peter, just do what I tell you, and I'll send you a school of fish in there." And he did. He sent the school of fish in there that the nets were about to break. Now there was another ship beside Peter. It belonged to his daddy. He had two ships. That showed how much they were. That showed how stewardess they were. That showed how good a fisherman they were. And that showed it. And they were good fishermen. And Peter said, "Lord, just because you said to, I'll do it." And so he did it. Threw that net on the other side, and they caught so many fish, the net was about to break. So he calls to his brother over there on the other ship, and he says, "Hey, y'all come here. Jump in the water. We're so close to the shore, we can pull this thing in by hand." So they jump in, they run the boat aground, and they get the net up there, and they start pulling it in. I would suspect maybe even Jesus put his hands on it. And they pulled it up on the shore and dumped the net on the shore. If my mind serves me right, I think it was like 56, 57 fish in that net. Big fish, not no little fish. Fish worth heaven. And at the same time, they look over there, and Jesus has got a fire going, and he's got this fish already cooked on the fire. That brings up a question. Where did he get the fish? Where did he come from? How did he get over there in the first place? They walked over there. Why was he at the very spot they came in? You want a 100-question essay? Start writing down the whys. Why? You can, you can do that in Jesus' life all the way through. He was there for the purpose. Why was he at the wedding when they ran out of wine? The first miracle. Why was he at the doorpost where the blind man was? The second miracle. Why was he at the pool of Bethesda after the water was troubled and the man couldn't get in? Why was he where he was? Why was he where he was when they brought the lady to him? Why did he tell the disciples, "I've got to go through Samaria. There's a woman going to come meet me at a well, and I've got to talk with her. She's been waiting on me for a long time. She is a half-breed, but she knows more about me than you guys do. She knows I was prophesied from the beginning. And when I start talking with her, she's going to tell me who I am." She said, "How could you tell me these things except you be that one that's sent from the Father?" Hey, the whys can be answered. All you have to do is do a little study. So here we are in the New Testament, and we see Peter. His book was written approximately between 64 and 67 after the cross. That's A.D. That's after the cross. Peter wrote 2 epistles, 1st and 2nd Peter. He was put to death sometimes during this period. 1st Peter was written evidently around 64, and 2nd Peter a little later, just before 67, or during 67. And then he was put to death. Although the place from which it was written, we don't know everything about it. But we believe that it was Babylon. Because in chapter 5, we can see in verse 13, let's go to 5 and 13 and see something here. 5 and 13 says this: "The church that is at Babylon, elect together with you, salute you, and so doth Marcus, my son." So we see that Peter was at Babylon more than likely, right here. And we see that the place from which, I was written, all right. Many treat this as a metaphorical thing. I don't. It's not a metaphor. He wrote it as a fact. He was, Peter has a lot to do with Rome. But he also had a lot to do with walking and traveling and being places. And he was evidently in Rome. The legend that Peter was in Rome for 25 years preceding his martyrdom is grounded in the apocryphal writings in the apocryphal thing and the writings. And so we see a lot of writings about Peter. Be careful. Be very, very careful. As a Christian, that you do not take the Catholic persuasion of Peter. He was not a saint. His sainthood was inside of him, given to him by God. His sainthood was only the fact that the Spirit of God came into him and filled him up and made him follow sanctified, follow God. He was a heathen when he was born, and in the flesh he was still a heathen when he died. But in the spirit he was a saint. But if we worshipped the body of Peter, we'd be in trouble. Because he's just like you and I. You say, but Brother Peter, we're saved now, we're sanctified, we're not supposed to sin. No, we're not, but we do. And that's why the priest and Peter get along good. Because the priest believes that he can say to somebody, well, you pay a little money here, you do a little penance, and you can be all right. No, Peter never preached that message. That wasn't a message Peter preached. That's totally misinterpreted by the Pope. Totally misinterpreted by the Catholic people. No, Peter wasn't a saint. We can't worship Peter. And we don't need to put no money in no barrel that says St. Peter. And that's not no way. The list of countries that Peter went in, he went from east to west. Some of the apostles went from north to south. Peter went from east to west. He crossed from the east to the west. He crossed the land in a suggested way that was different than the others did. And from Babylon is directly mentioned as the origin of this epistle. Was written before Rome was called Babylon in the symbolic way in the book of Revelations. Now we know the Babylonian system was also in Rome. But because Peter specifically says Babylon, I do not think he was referring to the system of Babylon in Rome. Also, the direct manner of Peter's writing, to the extent of the bluntness. Now, Peter was a blunt man. He was a bold man. Said what he thought and thought what he said. Right or wrong, it popped out of him. And so, he was a direct bluntness. He contracts the theory that he used Babylon as a symbol. I don't think so. If Peter had meant Rome, he'd have said Rome. If he meant Babylon, he said Babylon. And that's what he said. There was at that time a large colony of Jews in ancient Babylon who had fled Rome due to severe persecution under Claudius. There'll be some of you, this is a pause moment. Some of you just now had started with PH Tidbits and with Brother Peter. We're in our third excerpt of the book of 1 Peter. If you just happen to come on, you need to go ahead, pause this thing, get your Bible, and follow on. Now I'm doing a little bit right now. I'm doing a 10-minute thing right here in the middle of this excerpt on theology. The theological aspect of Peter as he walked across the land. When you're doing theology, you have a little bit of, in this day and age, a little bit of a problem. There are a lot of theologists who like to draw down to a point and say, all of you other guys are wrong and I'm right. Instead of believing that all of them have some right and all of them have some wrong. When you start putting summation, surmising that Peter was at Rome using the word Babylon as the system, when here again it says because of that Claudius there, that Peter had left Rome and gone. And at the time of the writing, old bloody Nero was on the throne. Had Peter been in Rome, he would have been in the Colosseum having lions eating him. And he would have been out there with a net fighting lions or fighting gladiators. So we believe that he had left. This is the harmony with the theme of the epistle, in spite of the fact that Pappus mentioned the death of Peter as occurring in Rome. Well, that's not very difficult to understand. That he went from Rome to Babylon, and he could have went back from Babylon to Rome. He could have been carried back there by chariot, horse and chariot. He could have been took there under chains. He could have been a lot of reasons why. There is no substantial historical basis for supposition. Let's leave supposition out of the Bible. If we come to something we don't really 100% understand, let's try not to make it be what we believe. It's if we do that, we're rewriting the Bible. And if you rewrite the Bible, the Lord said, if you add to this Bible and take away, I'm going to add it, the plagues of it to you. And I'll take away some from you. So be very careful. Don't use supposition. You say, Brother Peter, what do you know about the Apostle Peter? I know very little. I only know what this Bible tells me. And I know he was a man of like passion as I am. And I know his passion went from fishing for fish to fishing for men. And that's my passion. And I know he was willing to learn. And I know he was willing to sacrifice. If you're going to be a fisher of men, you got to learn how to sacrifice yourself. And how to come to what God wants you to be to. Peter's been called the Epistle of Hope. And he was. Paul was the Epistle of Faith. And John was the Epistle of Love. Now, I love the fact that almost every single solitary man on this earth that's got any gumption at all about him is like Peter. He planned in his life to make it work. Come hell or high water, he's going to make it work. I don't care what happens. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make my life work. I'm just going to work. And without God, it can. But the end of it's going to be hell and damnation. And the end of almost all peoples I know that made it work lost everything they had. Eventually, they got too big for their britches. And somebody smarter than them came along and said, look, my practice in life has been beating this guy. Now, I watched him make all this money in this business and everything and bring it to a place to where when it gets to that loophole, I'm going to grab it. And he takes that whole man's life and he grabs it in one foul swoop because he's richer than that man and a little bit smarter. So that man goes to his office and gets a gun out and shoots himself in the head. And his life is ended and he dies and goes to hell because he had championed out by a champion bigger than him. If you want to be a champion, be like Peter. Champion in God. Champion in soul winning. Champion in walking across this nation. Today, you can walk across any city in the United States of America and cross the whole nation. I can cross the whole world. Yesterday, I met a man who's just come here not long ago from Arabia. Sometime later, first of this week, I met a man from Mexico. You can meet a man from Italy in just a heartbeat. I can go down the road and meet a man from Rome. I can go the other way and meet a man from Spain. They're everywhere, from every nationality in the world, have accumulated here in the United States of America. I can cross the nations of this world right here. I can be a missionary, which I am. I am an evangelist missionary, which I am. I have encounters daily, with individual people. This boy I was with yesterday, I can see him being the Messiah for his people to get them out of where they are. I can see him being that. What's got to happen, Peter? I've got to keep dragging the net. I got to keep the net mended. I got to keep pulling him in closer and closer to the shore. And when I get him to the shore, then I've got to indoctrinate him to where he'll ask Jesus to forgive him for his unbelief. That's his sin. He told me that, well, he said, I smoke dope, I drink, I steal, I lie, I cheat, I do everything. I said, good, I'm glad you recognize that. One day God can deliver you from all of that, and you can be his. Isn't it wonderful when a man recognizes that he's all of the stuff he is opposite from God? That's a good recognition. I'm glad he recognizes that. When he gets to the point to where he's willing to put all of that behind him, God can do a great work with him. And that was Peter. The outline is suffering and security of a believer. 1 through 9. Suffering and security of a believer. We've got 3 minutes. I'm going to read verse 5 through 9. Who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be reserved in the last day, in the last time, wherein ye greatly rejoice through now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold, that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, be found under the praises and honor and glory at the appearance of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now ye see him not, yet believe ye, rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even as the salvation of your soul. What is the end of faith? The salvation of your soul. The salvation of your soul for eternity. The salvation of your soul is so important. And this is why we need to be saved. Hebrews 11:13, the book of Hebrews, and chapter 11, is the book of those written down who made it through and got their name written down. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Ephesians, Thessalonians, Titus, Hebrews 8:12. Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11, what verse did I say? Hebrews 11:13. It said, these all died in faith. Woo! Ain't that something? If you're saved, and this body goes to the grave, your body goes to the grave, my body goes to the grave, we're going to die in faith. Wow. Not having received the promise, but having seen them afar off. Now, we hadn't received that final promise yet, but we can see it. And I'm 75. It's not too far off. I'm in better shape than a 25-year-old. He could have 50 more years to see it. And I may just have a few. And were persuaded of them that embraced them and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. I'm just like all the other saints that have gone on before. I am persuaded by this book. Some of them wrote this book. And I'm persuaded as they were that, in verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly they seek a country. God talks about another country. A country not made with hands. Even though this one was spoken to existence. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. Whew. And this is this after the resurrection, after the first death. We're going back into a country. God said He's going to make a new heaven and a new earth. I believe this verse is saying right here, boys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, the country that I promised you, that you just walked through and didn't keep my commandments, and the country you was headed into, which is the promised land, was the same land. But you desecrated it. And I couldn't bless it. I could have took any desert and turned it into a paradise. But because of your actions, I wasn't allowed to. If you're a Christian, you're saved, and you're following God, and you more than likely probably are if you're watching this excerpt. Quit desecrating the land that you're in. How do I desecrate that, Brother Peter? Well, when I first got saved, I had to learn not to lie. A lie desecrated my land where I was, living on a little old street down at the end of a cul-de-sac, on a little old street, dead end, in the middle of a poor town. But it was heaven on earth at our house after I got saved. Threw the television out the door on the sidewalk, broke it up. Got rid of all the alcohol, the bottles, and the swearing, the cussing. And God said, you got something else here, Peter, that's desecrating your life. And He said, you need to take those cigarettes that you're smoking on a daily basis and get rid of those. Those aren't part of me. Those are not part of me. Those are part of what the devil brought out here, and you're following that through. So you got to get rid of that. So I had to get rid of those. So my little spot on earth became a little paradise on earth. Now where you live can become that paradise on earth. can be that land, can be what was the wicked land, right in the same spot, made into a good land. God can water your garden in that same place. Well, my time's come and gone. I haven't gone anywhere in the book. We're down at verse 9 on the first chapter, and we're on our third excerpt. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Brother Peter, tidbits from the Word.